Good evening, everybody. Today is June 20th, and I'm going to be reading messages from yesterday, the 19th, and today, the 20th. And before I get started on yesterday's message, there's just a couple things I wanted to talk about before we get into it. Kind of wanted to explain my experience yesterday. I got a very short message, and the Lord said it was going to be a short but powerful message. And, I had this big expectation. I feel like the messages kind of have been building. And, there's some days where I just feel so full of faith. And there's some days where I feel like like I have faith like a mustard seed, like just a tiny little bit, and I'm just barely holding on. And yesterday was one of those days that it just threatened. There was like a string that was pulling and threatening to unravel me completely. And I guess I had these expectations, because the messages seemed to be building, and at the end of the message I was just left kind of confused and kind of specifically he gives a prophecy about what he's going to do with the weather. And I looked up the forecast and kind of looked at predictions for this summer's weather, and because it didn't align with what he was saying, I just started to doubt. And I really feel like he was pointing out, and I'm really thankful. He knows exactly how he's going to react to that message before it even happened. And he knows, where my false idols are, and he highlights them. So when we have fear and when we have doubt, that points to the thing that causes our fear, points to our idol. So, we have some pretty strong programming. We have, we live in a world that's, physical and temporary and temporal, and he's the ultimate reality. Things of the spirit are actually more real, but in this physical realm that we're living in, that's hard to see. And sometimes we fear things that we can't control. We fear things like my expectations can be an idol. My need to control and feel safe can be an idol. The weatherman can be an idol. If I trust the weatherman more than God, then that is putting something between him and I. So I was just thinking about these things yesterday, and right after I got this message, my spirit was really anticipating and looking forward to spending time with the Lord, but my flesh was fighting me, wanting to procrastinate, wanting to run, wanting to avoid. And so the war already started before I even got the message. And my husband got home from work, and I just had finished, with the Lord, and he came in and he asked a simple question, and I about bit his head off. There was no fruit of the Spirit. There was none of that. And it was because I was being tossed to and fro, inside of myself. And I really had to wrestle this out with him. And it's silly because he's given me other, weather prophecies, and they've come true. And my reaction was exactly like this, when I first hear the things. Like, for example, it was like toward the end of April, and he said there was going to be unexpected weather and a big snowstorm, and he was pointing to the Michigan area, and I was again looking at the Weather Channel, and there was no indication of that, and the weather was too warm for snow. And I kept watching it, and I just was like, it was kind of like, okay, if this doesn't happen, then that means that none of this is real, and there's just something wrong with me, and I have some kind of psychological issues. And so I was having those feelings wrestling, and I looked on May 1st and May 2nd. I kept watching the weather, and sure enough, they got 2 feet of snow. It was like historical, record-breaking. I think the temperature was colder than it ever had been, and 2 feet of snow was something that hadn't ever happened. And then on the same day, they had the dust storms in Illinois, and people were getting into car accidents and all kinds of things. It was a big news. So I was just like, okay. And it's like, he's faithful. He's faithful. Even when I'm not, when I'm ready to just give up and question everything and question him, he's still faithful. It doesn't change who he is. It's like, Lord, please help me learn this lesson. And then there was another time where he said that the sun was going to not shine. It wasn't going to be as hot, and I was going to wonder about this. And I forget when that was, maybe toward the end of May. And sure enough, the fires in Canada caused, so much smoke and haze that you could look directly at the sun, and it was actually very cold. And I was wondering about that. I had a lot of wonder. The sun looked so tiny, and just being able to look right at it was unbelievable, and not being able to feel its warmth. So those are two very recent experiences where he was faithful and told me what was going to happen, and I just was so full of doubt because, well, I couldn't imagine it. My logical mind couldn't reason it. And but my spirit was just like my spirit knows, but my spirit knows the truth. This truth lives in me, and it doesn't let me go. Ultimately, it doesn't let me go. That's the mustard seed of faith that never leaves. But my flesh just war so strongly against it. And to have faith, you really have to crucify the flesh and just recognize that war. We live, and he has said this in messages, it's, the spiritual is more real than the temporal. And we as people of faith, we have to understand that war. And when I'm thinking about faith, of course, I'm thinking about Abraham, and I'm thinking about he was promised something. Just, that's how God is. He makes these promises, and he does these things that just do confound the wise. They're just absurd. The things that he says and the things that he does, it's absurd to the logical and to the mind and the flesh. He promised a very old man, he promised him he was going to be the father of nations, and the whole world would be blessed through him. And he was an old man with no children. And he said, God promised him that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. So every night of his life, he's out there looking up at the stars and remembering God's promise. And just, what must that been like, that he just held on to his faith because he didn't know how. It seemed impossible. But he's the father of faith because he never lost faith, because he knew who God was. He didn't have to know how or why. But God ultimately does these things to challenge our faith. And our faith is being challenged, in these days. He's saying some really big things that we cannot imagine, things that are just impossible. But we worship a God who does impossible things. He's a God of miracles. And so yesterday I just took a walk through memory lane, and I just went back, to the promises that he gave me from the beginning of this, and I had no idea that a person could hear the voice of God, that he could speak directly to you. But yeah, I was hearing it, and they would just come out one word at a time, and I would speak it and be surprised it formed a sentence. And I journaled these things, and these things I journaled in the beginning they're happening. And so when I just went and revisited those, and I've recorded those messages, but I'm going to read a couple of those. And I think people have asked, you can go back, and it's all documented. You can look at the earlier messages, but I'll just read a few of them that made zero sense to me. Things I didn't even know existed, and they're starting to happen. I still don't understand how it's going to all play out, but I don't have to. I don't have to. I just have to know who he is and trust him, and trust the promises that he has spoken to me personally. But as a corporate body, he's made promises to us. And we have to cling to those, because he is a God who does not lie, and he is outside of time. It's already done. And when he called Abraham and told Abraham those things, it was already done. And I think Abraham must have known that. He must have understood that about God, to be to have the faith that he had. God revealed himself to Abraham, and Abraham trusted in who God was. It made no sense that and he wasn't perfect. He and Sarah made mistakes, and guess what? God was still faithful. He still, when Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son, God knew what he would do. Why did God do that? He did it to show Abraham where he stood with the Lord. I think sometimes he does these things to reveal where we are. He already knows where we are. He already knows how we're going to respond. He already knows all the things. But he's teaching us, through some of these lessons. So I feel like he gave me this message, just to specifically point out to me where I was, and point out and highlight a few areas. Like, really, you're going to trust the weatherman still? That's what you're going to do? You're going to question everything because, the predictive programming says something and that makes you feel safer? So anyway, I'm going to go and find some of these first messages and read a few of them. So in a lot of the messages, he says, sing to me a new song. He says it to me. He says it to you. And I'm going to put in the notes again an article I found about that specifically. When the Bible says to sing a new song, I didn't know that. But the very first time I heard his voice, so I started speaking in tongues, and then I would speak English and prophesy immediately after. And sometimes those things that I would speak were to him, and sometimes those things I would to him from my spirit, and some of those things were from him to me. So the very first thing I said when I received tongues, July 10th, 2022, Father, this song is for you. And that theme has been throughout all of these messages. Is different songs, sing different songs every time I learn something, every time something's revealed to the Spirit, every time something's a chain is broken and there's freedom in different areas. And then he says, keep coming toward me, my child. So when I first would hear it, it would be, keep coming toward me, my child. And then I would be like, oh, and I would write it down. Keep coming toward me, my child. I made a sentence. These are the gifts of love for my people. I didn't understand what that meant. So then I would say things like, God, am I supposed to share these? Like, he said, this is what I want you to hear. It will happen when it is time. I didn't know what that meant. This is my plan for my sons and daughters. They will know love. Keep seeking the truth in my word. You are my child. I will not leave you. This one was interesting. On the same day I received this, one of my best friends sent me, he sent me a daily verse for years. And the daily verse that day was Psalm 23, which is the one, the Lord is my shepherd. Well, this is, first I got this, and then I received that message. It was confirmation. But it said, take this staff, it will lead the way. And I didn't know what that meant, take this staff, so I start researching staff, and I learned that the shepherds used to mark their staff like a journal. And they would, every time God did something amazing in their life, they would mark it on the staff. They would make a mark, and then they could tell the stories and remember the stories of the Lord. And so I was understanding that the journal that I was writing, all these things, and it was like my staff. It was going to lead the way. And also the staff is a form of leadership. One of my friends said that they thought I was going to be in kind of a shepherding role, and I could not even imagine that. And that seems to be happening. So take the staff, it'll lead the way. Keep this way, and I will show you how to rescue the lost. This is the way to me. Keep coming. For to keep this journal is the best testament for days to come. I didn't know what any of this meant. This was all July, August. Keep the way clear for you will know my voice. So the Lord helps me to keep the way clear. He gives me certain messages to highlight areas that he's saying, look, Melissa, you've still got, there's some things in between you and I. You got to get it out of there. But also, it's all a gift from him. I just need to ask for more faith. Like, I can't generate more faith. That's a gift from God. That's one of the spiritual gifts. So we can't even boast about how much faith we have. That's given by the Lord. And if we're dwindling, then we just ask. Ask, seek, knock. He loves to give good gifts to his children. When we desire the things that he desires us to have great faith. So he's going to give us that gift if we ask. When I was praying in tongues one day, I just got super emotional. I could hardly speak. And I said, Lord, I want all of these gifts to be received by your children. And he said, it will be done as you have said. Store these things in your heart. September 2022. Do not be afraid. I will come for you. Just keep going and tell people about me. Yes, it is true. I will take care of you. It is like a tree by a bank. I will not let it fall. It will keep producing for you. And then I looked up verses about trees, and I was shocked to see Ezekiel 47:12, Ephesians 5:6-8. Like, a lot of these things are scriptural, and I didn't know. He says, do not be afraid. You are my child. I hold you in my arms. Do not listen to men who are foolish. I can go back to that. That helps me tremendously, and these are promises I can go back to that he said. And these I can rely on, I can trust, because I trust him. Be aware of false teachings. I will come back for you. Do not be afraid. Come to me, my children, and I will give you rest. That is such a common theme now in these messages. I would just get these little one-liners, and they were just here and there. That was in January of 2023. Keep coming toward me, and I will reveal my Father's heart. Doesn't he do that in all of these messages? Reveal his Father's heart? It's just, that helped me. And I think that's why he gave me that message yesterday. It was just a lesson. And it was a short message, and I didn't see how it was going to be powerful, but now I do. It was very powerful for me to go through this. I'm going to read the very first long message I received on October 1st, 2022. First, he gave me Joel 2. And then he says, you will not keep the best for yourself. You will reward others through your inheritance in Christ Jesus. Keep going in the way of the Lord. Never give up. Do not be dismayed by the events to come. You will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You are learning by this, and I will continue to teach you, my child. I love you. You will be a blessing to the nations. I thought I was absolutely nuts when I wrote that. I'm like, do I have some kind of delusions of grandeur? Is there something happening to me? I didn't know that there was prophets of nations. I didn't know that. And then I read my first message at a Sunday night church meeting, and one of the guys started praying over me that I would be a prophet of nations, and it reminded me of this. And then I had to look up prophet of nations. I didn't even know that was a thing. I don't think my mind could come up with things that I wasn't even aware of. Do not be afraid of what I will do. You can come to me for protection. I will do as I say. Do not fail to follow my decrees. You will always know that I am doing what I say by the way I prophesy. It will be me. Do not fear. You can always look to me, and I will answer your prayers. Do not be afraid. You will have your inheritance. You will be blessed, and I will order your steps. So that is one I go back to, and I went back to yesterday, and I just read it, and it brought so much comfort to me. That despite how I feel, haven't we talked about this before? Despite how I feel, he's still faithful. He's still doing the work, and he's still going to complete it. Despite how I feel, because my feelings change from day to day. You can look at some messages, and I am just so pumped up, and I'm never going to doubt ever again because this happened. And then the next day, I'm like, questioning everything again. My feelings are all over the place. And when I go back to promises, and when I go back to the Word of God, and I remember who He is, then I settle down, because I can stand on a solid rock, and I'm not tossed to and fro in the waves of confusion. And then also, when he first told me to get up in the morning and start practicing with Him, and the messages, that was a little paragraph, but that was a long message. I didn't know what was happening. I was just writing, and it was just, for me, when I write, it comes out really easily. My mind is watching what I'm writing, but it's not coming from my mind. And it's kind of like when I would speak it out, it's harder for me to speak it out. Like, it's still, I'm practicing it, and it's getting more fluid. The confidence, and I think somebody told me they think it's because I'm a kinesthetic learner. Like, I'm a dancer, I learn by doing, and when I'm writing, I'm doing. It's just easier for me for some reason. But he told me he wants to practice, like, so I can just stand up and speak His word, and it will just trust it's going to come out of my mouth. That's going to take practice and faith, and I practice it in the car. And when I'm alone, I practice it, just so I can start to be like, okay, God, I know, that You are there, and I can just do it and get my flesh out of the way, and just let the Spirit do its thing. But when he told me in the beginning to sit down and sit with Him in the kitchen and practice hearing from Him and hearing His voice and writing, like, the messages immediately got very long. And the first few messages he told me, like, prophetic thing about Lebanon and Israel, and also about Saudi Arabia. And I thought it was totally nuts, because he never talked to me about anything like that before. And again, my logical mind is like, what is happening? Like, I'm crazy. And then I would go back and look these things up, and shortly after, both of those things happened exactly like he said. And I don't know anything about the Middle East, but those were things he was doing it to reveal my lack of faith and my fear, and just to highlight it, and then to show His faithfulness that He is doing this. So here we are, June 19th, and I go through this whole process yet again. So he says, Melissa, dear one, you're going to be able to listen to me in the quiet spaces and learn to see me there too. Listen to me. I am going to show you the way to capture the hearts of the lost. You will soon discover that all I have to offer them is not what they perceive. You will begin to see that the truth of the words I speak into their hearts is actually from me. I am doing this work, Melissa. Soon you too will believe all the words I have spoken. Soon you too will begin to set the people on the path toward me. Melissa, the day of your deliverance has arrived. You will be free. You will know it is me speaking. You will trust that I have done this work in you. You do not need to question so much. So I didn't even know at this point, like, how much I was going to be questioning after this message, and how much what he's saying to me, means to me today, after going through all of that. You just need to know that I am God, and I do what I promise. How can man begin to know what the plans for his life are? How can man arrive at his destination? When I'm writing this makes no sense to me, and I'm experiencing it like, what is happening? Like, where's this coming from? This isn't what I expected, but he's saying it. And then after I go through all of this, because the God who is outside of time and knows what he's doing and knows the lesson he's teaching me, is setting it up for me to come back to after I've learned the lesson, and just to feel so much confirmation, and just so thankful. Just so thankful that he's such a good God, and he's definitely holding me in his hand, and he's holding you in his hand. He's holding all of this in his hand, and he is faithful, and he is trustworthy, and he is good. So it says, how can man arrive at his destination? I am the one who leads him, and I order his steps. He is not aware of all that I prepare in advance for him to do. But he will soon see that I did assign specific appointed days for him, and he will know that I was leading. Yep. Melissa, this is going to be a brief but powerful message. Listen, daughter, the days are going to become very cold. You will see the temperature shift, and it will cause you to wonder, why is the weather cold? How did this happen? What caused this to occur? My child, the days are going to become colder so that the people will wonder. They will wonder about the agendas and the predictions. They will see that maybe not all they have been shown is factual. They will begin to question the intentions of the agenda. They will start to look for other answers. Some will turn to me and find truth. Melissa, you do not need to fear. I am here with you right now. I am holding you, and I will not let you go. You are safe and you are protected. Because isn't that the thing? That's the thing. That is the thing that scares me. Because I lived a lie. I believed a lie. And that's what happens to me. That's my wounded area. And he's so gentle in that area. And he's training me so gently and so patiently. Because I immediately go, I'm believing a lie. I'm believing a lie, it's all a lie. And I start to unravel. No weapon formed against you will prosper. My darling, write these words. How does a man change the dial on weather? How does he determine the seasons and the changes in air temperature? He doesn't. I am the Lord. I am in total control of all that is occurring. Listen, daughter, the days will become cold. They will cause many to wonder about this. You will soon see. And I said, Lord, is there anything else? Daughter, write these words. I know the plans I have for my children. They are plans of hope and for a glorious future. Hang on, dear ones. The day of my return is here. You will know it is me when all I say is fulfilled. You will not be left alone as orphans. I am here holding you. I am your heavenly Father, and I have spoken these words into your hearts. Hold on, children. Just hold on to me. I am going to finish this work, and it will be good. I love you, children. And then he gave me scriptures, and they all have 11 in it. I don't know why. Maybe the 11th hour. But Colossians 4:11. Habakkuk was just 3, but Leviticus 2:11, Malachi 3:11, Song of Solomon 3:11. And then he said Scriptures 2:11. So then I looked up, I googled Scriptures 2:11, and a whole bunch of really awesome verses came up. And I'll put them in the notes, but I started writing and it was just too many. So maybe you just want to do your own search of that. But 2 Corinthians 2:11, 2 Thessalonians 2:11, Psalms 2:11, Zechariah 2:11, Luke 2:11, Hebrews, Romans, Proverbs, Hosea. All of those are really awesome. And Revelation, I went back and I just looked through the whole Bible, all the 2:11s, but there was lots. Peter, Revelation, really good stuff. Then I heard the word long suffering. Then I heard planetary alignment. And I was like, okay, this whole thing, I was in a bad place, when I was writing all this stuff. I kind of had a bad attitude. But I looked up planetary alignment, and guess what? This weekend there's a rare 5-planet alignment, which I was not expecting. Didn't we just have something like that? I didn't know there was going to be another one, and so I was like, okay. And then I heard surrender. And so I looked up long suffering and got a verse, and surrender, got a verse. I'll put those in the notes. All right, God bless. I hope that this message was encouraging, and I hope it was powerful. Like he said, it was going to be short but powerful. The video's kind of long, but to me, that was a very, very powerful day that I had with the Lord, and a very important wrestling match that we had yet again. We'll see if this one sticks. All right, God bless you.